Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Health Babes podcast. I am your host, Dr. Crystal Hohn, and today we're going to talk about all things menstrual cycle. With so many years in practice working with so many women, I really learned just how much we don't know about our menstrual cycle. And there are so many things we can do and use them like to our advantage, right? The different hormonal pictures that we have, different things we should be doing in our diets, how we should potentially be working out depending on our hormonal picture. What does some of that hormonal picture look like, right? And so I'm really excited to dive in with you guys. We've had some amazing experts on here too, also, that have shared a lot with hormones, but hormones have been such an amazing thing even in my own health journey. And I absolutely love to geek out on this stuff. So I thought, what a better time to dive in and you guys hear from me. So let's start talking about the menstrual cycle and what does that look like and what's involved in it. So let's first start with what is a menstrual cycle, right? What does that look like? And I like to describe this as different phases. We have the first 2 weeks in the menstrual cycle, which is called the follicular phase. Then we have, after the follicular phase, ovulation, right? When the egg drops and when we are fertile. And then we have something called the luteal phase, which is the second half of the menstrual cycle. That is essentially what you want to work with. And when I like to talk about the menstrual cycle, I like to look at it in different weeks, right? The different 4 weeks divided up. And there's so many things that you can do. There's so many different types of hormonal pictures that are going on. So let's start from week 1. So week 1 is that bleed week, right? This is in the follicular phase, right? And typically what you're going to see is hormones very low. And when I say hormones, what I mean are things like testosterone, progesterone, estrogen. During that bleed week, when we are on our periods, our hormones are very low. Those hormones are. What you would want to look at, though, and what you will see is we have also 2 other hormones, which is called the follicle stimulating hormone or luteinizing hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone does start to rise, right? Because we're trying to get that dominant follicle, right, for ovulation. And so it starts pulsing early on in that first week. So you will start to see a rise in FSH. And LH does start to slowly rise a little bit in this week too. So typically what you'll want to see is a 1-to-1 ratio with FSH and LH. So if you were to run some labs, okay, in the follicular phase in that first week, usually day 2, day 3 is where you would want to check estradiol in blood and FSH and LH. Some of the different hormonal pictures where you can see LH go a little bit higher, higher than that 1-to-1 ratio with FSH. So it's going to be a little bit higher than that, is things like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. You also can see this with high prolactin levels, metabolic issues. Now, I'm not going to go into that too deep right now, but this is where you can start to see some of the issues with that. And so it is important to check those hormones, with your medical provider. So with FSH, LH, you want to see a 1-to-1 ratio, but most of our hormones here are low, right? So when I'm talking about the first week, during that bleed, right, when you're bleeding, that first day especially, I do like to take it easy with, not doing too much that first day, whether it's like you going for a long walk, focusing on getting 10 to 15,000 steps a day. You can lift, but me personally, I just like to give myself a day when I first start my period. I definitely will stay active. and be busy, because it does really help to getting that movement in. It's helpful for your joints, especially as you're a little bit sore with that first day. Some of the symptoms that's normal too when you start your period are a little bit of cramping. You may feel a little fatigued, a little bit tired, right? That first day, but it will gradually get better as your bleed week goes on. But that first day, that's normal. Now, what's not normal is if you feel as though it's debilitating or ruining your normal activities of daily living. If you're not able to go to school, if you're not able to go to work, if you are in excruciating pain, that's not normal, right? And that's where I would definitely dive in and look to your hormones and get things checked and things like that, which we'll talk more about that. But start when you first start your period, that first day, give your body some time to acclimate, right? Take care of yourself. It's a very sacred time. But because as this week moves forward, because our hormones are technically really low, this is where you can stress the body out a little bit more, right? And what I mean by that is things like the different workouts you can do. So in that first week, lifting heavy, this is where, you're lifting really heavy, maybe going lower reps to really get that benefit. Because your hormones are lower, we're able to stress the body out a little bit more. We're just a little bit more resilient, especially if you feel pretty good throughout your cycle, right? So you definitely want to lift heavy. You can do some high intensity training like HIIT. Personally, in my own health journey, I really like to walk on incline. I may do some HIIT like sprints, but back in college, I was always a long distance runner, and I really do feel like it messed with my hormones. So I got out of that, but some people feel really good on it. So if you feel good, then you definitely can incorporate some of that, longer distance running and things like that with cardio. So as far as diet goes here, if you think about it, we have a lot of output going on, right? We're letting go of a lot of nutrients, right? So iron and with a bleed week and things like that, zinc, selenium, all these things, right? That our body is getting, we're just flushing things out. And so it's very much important to make sure you are eating a nutrient-dense diet, focusing on protein. Protein is so big, especially for those amino acids, right? And also too, just for our metabolic health and for building muscle. I mean, I could go on and on about protein, and there's so much research now about how important protein is. So definitely make sure you're getting in your protein. I do like to focus on getting 0.8 per gram, when it comes to protein, 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Now, it's hard for people, right? So if it's something that you struggle with, try to get at least 100 grams. That's kind of what we like to share with people. Okay, so protein is really important. I also like getting in lots of fiber. This is also really important, and fiber in the form of greens. So when we talk about greens, things like cruciferous veggies, so sprouts, broccoli, kale, spinach, lots of leafy greens is really, really important in this first phase, this first week, but also going into weeks 2 and 3. Greens are so important for, the compounds like, DIM and sulforaphane. So getting in, how we're metabolizing our hormones, making sure that we're choosing those really protective pathways is very, very important. So you want to make sure that you are getting in those greens. Now, there's a lot of things out there right now. And Beck and I also have talked a lot about oxalates and things like that. Now, with being in practice, A lot of the times, there are some people who do not break down oxalates easily. And if you are, one of those people, whether it's coming from genetics, you definitely want to limit those things. But most people in our, just in our experience, we find that they handle them good. And especially if you're cooking them, because it really does break down a lot of the oxalates. Now, keep in mind too, you may be dealing with an infection in the gut too. I have found a lot of, and this is just my personal experience and practice, infections in the gut can really hinder us breaking down these different plant antigens too, like oxalates and salicylates and things like that. So just keep that in mind. So going back to workouts, you want to lift heavy, maybe lower reps. This week too, with your moods, you are going to feel good. It's really interesting once you start keeping track of your periods and really paying attention to your cycle, just how much your moods are different at these different phases. So pay attention to that. So this week you are going to feel more confident to take on scarier things. So if you have a meeting that you want to plan, something that's more high stress, definitely plan it in this first week, in my opinion, because you are going to feel a lot more at ease and you're going to want to tackle harder things here. Definitely don't tackle the hard things that fourth week leading into your period, because that's when things are heightened. You're supposed to be a little bit more low mood that week, which we'll get into. Okay. So just keep that in mind. So your first week, just really, you can stress your body out a little bit more depending on your hormonal picture, right? If you have a lot of things going on and like low thyroid function or your energy is off, be careful of all of that. Take this all with a grain of salt depending on your hormonal picture. But this is typically the week that you can do more and have more stress resilience with the body just because of that hormonal picture. Okay. So let's dive into the second week of the follicular phase. So your hormone picture here is estrogen is definitely in this week reaching its highest peak in the second week. And you're going to notice some of the benefits of that. You may notice you have plumper skin. Your skin's glowing a little bit more. Your testosterone is also rising in this week. So you may be a little bit more attracted to your spouse or your partner. This is all very normal. So estrogen is rising, testosterone is rising. And so there's a lot that we can do to help and work with our body with this. So also too, follicle stimulating hormone, another hormonal picture that's happening here, is being very much pulsed slowly as estrogen rises and as estrogen peaks. And once we choose that dominant follicle, this is when FSH, that follicle stimulating hormone, will start to lower. Okay. So keep in mind here too, estradiol also really tells the endometrium to push out more progesterone receptors. So we really want a high peak of estrogen here. Having that high peak of estrogen here is really, really important for fertility, right? For fertility, for ovulation, all the things, okay? Keep in mind also in this second week, as estrogen rises, your ligaments and things in the body are going to be a little bit more lax. And so I have made this connection in practice, especially with women, that when you are in that second week, you're a little bit more prone to injury. And that's something to keep in mind when it comes to estrogen. Okay. So usually if someone comes to me and they're like, oh man, I went skiing or I was lifting and I hurt my knee, I'm like, oh Lord, where were you at in your cycle, right? And typically it is in that second week. So just be very careful with burst training, doing a lot of HIIT things. That's very, very important. So diet-wise, protein again, protein, fiber, greens. This is very important. Again, for that testosterone and muscle building, you definitely want to lift heavy here, right? I'm a proponent of lifting weights all throughout the cycle. But as our hormones are, rising, especially that testosterone and estrogen, use that to your benefit, lift heavy. And it's so important, and you'll really start to see a difference in your muscle and things like that. As far as protein goes, same thing, you want to get that in with each meal. Greens, same thing, you want to get that sulforaphane and all of those components to help with metabolism of hormones. So for example, let's say when you get that rise in estrogen, right, in that second week, you may have an increase in your symptoms of things that may be a little bit off in your cycle. For example, you may have an increase in hives. You may have more brain fog. You may get bloated. You may break out a little bit more around ovulation time or leading up to ovulation when we get this rise in estrogen and testosterone. All of that can be coming from underlying drivers of imbalances that are making those hormonal pictures worse. So whenever I see patients or people complain of symptoms worsening around ovulation time or leading up to ovulation in that second week, I say, okay, let's dive into those gentle detox methods, right? Let's start using the castor oil packs. Let's make sure we're having healthy bowel movements. Let's make sure our diet is really pulled in. We're staying away from inflammatory foods, watching a lot of starches and things like that, but also taking care of that phase 1, phase 2 estrogen metabolism, right? You may not be metabolizing hormone efficiently. What does your gut health look like? All of these things are really important when it comes to looking at symptoms at different times in your cycle. Okay, so keep in mind with that, when it comes to that. So, in that follicular phase in the second week, we want to be, like we said, lifting heavier, utilizing that testosterone, building muscle, making sure our diets are low inflammatory, getting in lots of greens and things like that. In this week too, as you're going into ovulation, I find that, most women still feel that confidence, but we also can, start to feel the effects of ovulation approaching, especially if you're having those imbalances in testosterone, having those imbalances with estrogen and things like that. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So as week 2 ends, we're sliding into ovulation, right? And we ovulate 10 to 36 hours after that LH surge. We really don't know. There's not a test for LH, like specifically of when that happens. But basically, LH is helping release the egg from the follicle, right? So once you release the egg, it's only around 4 to 24 hours, depending on the health of the egg. So, let's say you're wanting to get pregnant, right? You want to make sure that you're having sex right before ovulation, and I say after, because that egg is only around for that 4 to 24 hours, right? You can only really get pregnant. So, but sperm can live within you for, around 5 days. So you want to have sex before you ovulate and after you ovulate, right? So just keep that in mind as you move forward when it comes to ovulation and working with your cycle. You may notice too, around ovulation, you will have this cramping, which is called Mittelschmerz cramping. Typically it only happens as the egg is releasing, so it can be very uncomfortable. It's like a stabbing pain, but it's usually has to do with a lot of the prostaglandins that are happening. Keep in mind too, if you are wanting to get pregnant, okay, you need that that prostaglandin effect. You do not want to take any NSAIDs around ovulation time because it can impact fertility. We have seen a lot of that, and there has been some research with that. Okay, so let's dive into the luteal phase, right? This is the third week in the menstrual cycle. The luteal phase is typically 12 to 16 days. And right after ovulation, we are going to see another rise in estrogen, but FSH is going to be lower. Again, LH is going to be lower. And after we ovulate, this is where the theca and granulosa cells, right, convert into the corpus luteum, which then produces progesterone. So this is in the luteal phase, this is where we're going to have an increase, right, in progesterone and an increase in temperature, basal body temperature. So personally, I really like to use the Oura ring. Me and Beck talk a lot about this, but the Oura ring can really show you the rise in your temperature and when that happens. And it's really neat because it's on you all the time. So it's really getting a specific picture. And so you can really use your cycle to your benefit and to really see where this is happening for you. Temperature only rises after ovulation. So you will see those spikes, and it is really cool when you do correlate it on the Oura ring. Okay, so in that third week too, estrogen also has a slight rise again. And in this week, again, you're going to want to make sure that you are getting in still good protein. I would also, in the luteal phase, I like to also make sure you're getting in carbs along with your protein. It's important for that. And then you definitely still want to lift, maybe not as heavy as in that first week or even when testosterone rises, but you definitely still want to lift here. Going back to that first week though, since I didn't mention this, that's when you could incorporate some fasting, but listen to your body on that. You never want to make yourself feel worse off, right? Your body is very smart. And so if you don't feel good when you fast, definitely listen to that. But the first week, because the hormone picture is lower, you definitely can incorporate some fasting. So going back to this third week, definitely lift. I would also make sure that you're getting, you're eating in balance. So lots of good protein, carbs, fat, lots of veggies and fiber, again, especially with that estrogen rise, especially, during the luteal phase, especially if your progesterone and estrogen ratios are off, you will feel the effects of that. So you'll start to feel, maybe breast tenderness towards the end of that week, more anxiety, especially if your progesterone is lower and things like that. So just keep that in mind. But again, hormonally with that picture, progesterone is rising, right? And then we also have a little rise with estrogen again. Okay, so let's dive into the fourth week of your cycle. Now, keep in mind too, when it comes to the fourth week, this is kind of where you will start to notice, we'll talk a little bit about moods, but you will start to feel like you need to go inward a little bit. And this is really important, and to know that this is a normal process with the body. If you have a lot of things on your mind, you want to listen to that, right? You want to really give your body and your mind that space, right, to feel those feelings. And then when you are more confident, or you want to people again, right, which is so true. Most people just want to go crawl in a warm fuzzy blanket, have a nice cup of tea, and just be by themselves in this phase, right, this fourth week. But when you start to feel confident again, right, in your follicular phase, this may be where you want to address some of those things that you were starting to feel in that luteal phase in that 4th week. So maybe just really take time and listen and think about the thoughts that you're having and hold space for that, but then take more action on those things to see, okay, what in my life potentially needs change? What is not serving me? This is really important, you guys, because, you know, our menstrual cycle really is such a huge part of our lives, and we can use a lot of it's smart. Our body's smart, right? And so we can use a lot of this to really help us in life. So just keep that in mind because it's very, very helpful. But again, you're going to want to be solo this week. Going back to, you know, if you're starting to feel the breast tenderness, this is where you're going to start to feel maybe more bloating. You're going to start maybe not sleeping as well, but sometimes you can start to sleep a little bit better. Same with the first couple of days of your period. You have that effect of, you know, resting more deeply just with everything that your body is going through. But some women do feel that they don't sleep as good, especially if their progesterone isn't, you know, as efficient as it could be. So getting in more protein, carbs are your friend here. You do want to increase your carbs. And I'm not saying go out and eat a box of donuts. I'm just saying maybe have, you know, some extra fruit in your smoothie, but pair it with like fat and protein, fiber, right? Maybe do like just some extra calories too. Overall, you're going to want to do. And you will feel better if you give your body the things it needs with the demands that it has during this week. So more carbs, more protein. Throughout your whole menstrual cycle, guys, we definitely need to be drinking water, getting in at least half your body weight in ounces of water a day. We want to be getting in electrolytes. I really like Element. They're fantastic, especially if you feel good on them. Most of you know that we are a huge proponent of electrolytes. I will tell you time and time again, so many women and men are not drinking enough water, and it's really impacting your bowel movements, hormone metabolism, flushing of toxins, all the things. So water is very, very important among getting in a, you know, nutrient dense diet when it comes to that. So, you know, with hormones too, and with this endometrial lining thickening, we do just want to really take care of ourselves, quiet the mind, do more gentle things, definitely still lift, but maybe, you know, less weight, not as heavy here. You definitely can walk. I wouldn't do a lot of HIIT training or high intensity training. Some people feel good on it though. Again, listen to your body. But personally, I like getting in those steps along with including weight training. But again, you know, listen to your body. You will have more food cravings at this time. So that's, that's just a caveat. It's not you. You're not bad for having cravings. If you want that extra chocolate, this is really, really important, you know? So the endometrial thickening too really uptakes a lot of amino acids too. So it requires a lot from us. This is why we want to make sure we're still getting in that protein. And, you know, when it comes to the transition from perimenopause to menopause, this week in our cycle can really kind of give us a foreshadowing of what it's going to be like as we transition into menopause. So if this is a really hard week for you, this is your sign to maybe dive in a little deeper on why that is. And I will tell you, with working with so many women throughout the years, it could be a combination of things, and simple things, for as a matter of fact, as things like stress, your diet. Maybe you're not metabolizing hormones as efficiently, right? So there's some things you need to work on as far as hormone metabolism, liver support, nutrients, but sleep, right? Sleep is a huge one. So definitely, take a step back and think to yourself, what in my life do I need to work on to really help to set myself up to just have a healthier period, right? Or to have a healthier transition from perimenopause to menopause, because your body is so smart and your period really is your vital sign. It's really important to look at your period as your health, right? And to see, okay, what is it that I need to work on, and kind of divide it up in stages like this and look at it week to week and think, what can I do in each week to help it better? But in general, we want to be making sure we're eating a nutrient dense diet. We're really working on our stress. We're focusing on getting in lots of really good sleep, working on gentle detox. You may have some hormone metabolism issues where getting your hormones checked. I personally love a Dutch test where it shows how your body, not only your levels, but it's showing how your body is metabolizing your hormones, right? And where you need to support that further. Things like gut health. A lot of our gut health determines how we metabolize hormones, you guys. So if you're really struggling in any of these phases, especially that week leading up to ovulation, that third week, right, in the menstrual cycle, and fourth week in the luteal phase. So mainly like the first week, if you have 1 week in your menstrual cycle, will you feel good? That's a sign that something is off, and you need to figure out why. And there's a lot that you can do. But first, you want to see, what your hormones are looking like, right? So anyways, so the fourth week, you just really want to just take care of yourself. Really make sure you're getting in protein, carbs, balanced diets, things like that, right? And, if you don't keep up with the demands of what your body needs, your body is really going to feel it too, especially in this week. So, and what I mean by that is you're going to notice your HRV is lowering, your basal metabolic rate will decline, your sleep is crap, right? Your sleep score, your moods will increase, right? So I also don't like any fasting in this week. You want to really take care of yourself and prepare it for your bleed week. So I know this is a lot of information, and I would love in the future too, I may divide it up and go into way more detail with each week. But again, using your period, and helping different areas, use your period as your power source, right? You can work with your body to really help depending on the different hormones that are increasing and decreasing and things like that. So it's very, very helpful if you start to learn what's going on within your body and doing a lot of things necessary to help it. One thing I want to touch on too, I love supplements. I really do, you guys, but you do want to be careful depending on what your body needs. I do go in a lot of this in the Dutch course, our Health Babes Dutch course, where we break down the Dutch test and give different supports depending on the different imbalances found. Same with our gut course. But for cycles and just overall support, I do want to give some that I just love. You definitely want to look at your vitamin D levels. That's really important, especially for ovulation and for your bleed week and the follicular phase, both. I mean, for just overall hormones in general, making sure we have healthy, adequate levels of vitamin D, especially if you're not getting a lot of sun exposure, right? Depending on where you live. Magnesium is very important, especially for blood sugar and insulin. It's also very important for the metabolism of hormones, so that phase 2 estrogen metabolism. It's also very helpful for stress and anxiety and sleep. I mean, it is a powerhouse. So magnesium is something I personally like to supplement with 400 milligrams a day, but I will increase that. Sometimes I'll take it in the morning and then double the dose and take some at night before sleep, depending on where, my stress is at and things like that. Omegas are really important. Just be careful taking anything really anti-inflammatory around that ovulatory stage, right, in the cycle, because you want that prostaglandin effect for ovulation and fertility. Okay, you want to be careful. So a lot of people who get those middle schmerz cramps around ovulation will take an NSAID, and it will really impact their fertility, right? And so you want to be careful of that. So fish oil, I like magnesium, vitamin D. Again, greens is great, getting in lots of greens. I like to get those in smoothies and pack those in with foods. I also like working on digestion, you guys. This is important. And most of us are not chewing our food enough. Most of us have issues with digestion. And so if that is the case, it's going to have a downstream effect, right? So we're not absorbing the nutrients from our food, which is going to impact our hormones all around. Thyroid hormones, sex hormones, all the things, our adrenals. So I personally like working a lot with the bitters, taking that before meals. It really helps stimulate hydrochloric acid levels and has a downstream effect, right? So getting in bitters is really, really good. Digestive enzymes. You can take hydrochloric acid, just be careful. You always want to test it and see how, and not a test, like testing your levels. I mean, just if you take some, start slow. If you feel any burning, you're taking too much. So you want to, hold off or decrease your dose from there. So digestive enzymes are really, really good. I find they're very helpful at, lessening the stress on our gut health. So that's something that I often take every day. So those are some big ones that I think are very important for hormones, but there's so many amazing hormonal supports. We talk a lot about DIM and sulforaphane too, to help with the metabolism of estrogen. But you want to be careful and you want to see which one is right for you. Sulforaphane is a little more safe in my opinion, because it's not going to lower overall estrogen in circulation. You want to be careful. DIM's great, but it can lower estrogen in circulation if you are not high in estrogen already. So be careful of that. But it is a beautiful supplement that has been very helpful with that. And then of course, there's a lot of great progesterone ovulation supports like chaste tree and B vitamins, things like that. So again, the list is endless with supplements, but those are some of my favorites when it comes to that. I do like to use a protein powder. We like Be Well by Kelly. You can use the code HealthBabes5 to get $5 off, but to get in the protein, I find it's hard for me if I don't have a protein powder to really hit my macros fully, just because I feel full when I'm getting in a lot of protein. So getting in a smoothie or just having a protein shake to meet my protein macros is really, really helpful. So I hope you guys learned a little something from this episode. I plan to do a lot more with hormones. It's such a fun topic. There's so much to learn, but thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, if you can pop over and leave a review, that would be awesome. You can also find us over at healthbabes.com, where you can find our courses, our latest book. We also are on Instagram at The Health Babes, at Dr. Becky Campbell, or at Dr. Crystal Hohn. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.